Mark?
It,
Well, thanks, David and Bob, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having the meeting.
I like the cathedral background there.
That is the law library at the University of Michigan.
Is it? Okay. Beautiful.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Do we have anyone on, Peter?
We do. We have, well, we got a couple. We got, we have 4 residents.
Okay.
Plus Taz.
Tavis from the fire department?
Yeah, I have invited him to come, just in case.
Okay. Great. All right, well, let's get started. Would it make sense to just promote the citizens in as well, so we can all be on the screen together?
Yeah, I mean, we know who they are, so I'm not worried about a Zoom bomb thing.
Yeah, okay.
We've got 5, and they're all. So Chuck, Dan, McCurdy's, Lynn, and Mike, Chief Hamill, we're going to promote all you guys. Here's Supervisor Stika, Trustee Jackson, Stephen, if you could keep, I'm going to go to PowerPoint at some point. If you could keep an eye on the panelists.
Trying to figure out what I need to do here to get audio settings.
Is that you?
Audio. Here, Mr. McCurdy.
Yeah.
Oh, volume up. Maybe that's what I need to do. There we go.
We'll give Larry McCurdy a chance to get settled in here.
Not seeing anybody else.
Larry and Kathy, are you ready?
Yes, I got to figure out how to get my picture on again, but.
Okay, but we'll go ahead and start. You can hear us okay?
I can hear you fine. Thank you, Frank.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so thank you, everyone. We have a few board members on tonight. We have a lot of our staff here tonight. We have Mayberry Homes here as well. What we thought we would do is just go through really quick. The first thing I wanted to ask is, are there any residents here, although it's not our under our auspice, the cell tower, is there anyone on? Just speak up if you have any questions about the cell tower process as best we know it. Does anyone have a question? Hearing none.
No.
I also hear.
Well, I mean, I guess not so much with the process. I talked to Peter yesterday. He was helpful. I assume that that Schroeder, the folks know that the cell tower is going to be built. It's very close to their property.
Bob or Dave, did you want to comment on that?
Not necessarily. Yeah. It's,
okay. Okay. Yeah. Of course, it still has. Go ahead.
Is the cell tower decision already made, or is that
what is the situation? I did see that there's a proposed cell tower on the property of Bennett Woods, correct?
Right, and that has to go through the Board of Education at the school. And it's my understanding, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, it hasn't gone through the school board yet.
Yeah, I didn't.
That's correct. The school board had already approved it. It was kicked back to them because in order to meet the township ordinances, they have to do a land division to create a separate parcel for the tower. So yes, it'll be on the Bennett Woods property over on the west part of the property, close to the Champion Woods. I mean, we've got some concern about that because it's closer to our neighbors than to the bus barn. And there would be, good line of sight to it from some of our neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
And I also see we have our drain commissioner, Pat Lindeman, on as well. So past cell tower, I thought what we would do is have Peter go through really quickly the yield plan and then where we're at on things real quick, and then go to Mayberry very quickly, and then just take questions. And we should be taking questions within 15 minutes as we go through this. So Peter, you want to kick it off real quick?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Frank. Thanks to the residents in attendance tonight. Some of you may remember me from the rezoning process. I'm Peter Menser, the principal planner with our Department of Community Planning and Development. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to switch over to, I'm going to share my screen. I have a very, very brief PowerPoint I'm going to run through that hopefully is going to address any of the questions you might have about the project and the proposal. It does take a second to switch over though. Okay, can you see my screen?
Coming in perfectly, Peter.
Cool, thanks, Stephen. All right, so on plan unit development has been submitted to the township for consideration. From Okemos Land Investment LLC, which is Mayberry Homes, and the overall proposal is to construct the Silverleaf PUD to consist of 150 detached single-family homes on approximately 94 acres. I think we're all familiar where we're talking about, but what you see here in dashed in red is the project area. This is the area, the 93.9 acres that would be covered by the plan unit development. I'm sure you all remember the rezoning that happened in 19 and early 20. There was a change in the zoning of the property to RAA and PO, professional and office. So there's 93 acres of RAA and 3 acres of PO zoning. Now, it was a conditional rezoning. So the applicant voluntarily, they offered 7 conditions on the rezoning request. Those conditions, they run with the land and they apply to the current and any future property owners. To amend those conditions or change them or remove them, that would need approval from our township board. So the rezoning was approved at our January 7, 2020 township board meeting. So that property has been rezoned and the conditions do apply to the property today. I'm not going to read through these, but these are the 7 conditions that from the rezoning. They are posted on the township website where the rest of the application materials are located. But if you remember, it's 150, maximum 150 homes, no vehicle connections, minimum of 75-foot distance between the houses in Champion Woods and any houses in Silverleaf. There's 20 acres that are going to be dedicated to the township. This kind of illustrates some of the conditions that in purple you're seeing that donated. It's approximately 20 acres. It would be open space in the PUD, but owned by the township. And you can see the PO down along Bennett Road, that was 3 acres that was rezoned as well. So that PO zoning is not a part of this plan unit development. That is a separate piece of land, not proposed for development right now. So what's going to be in front of the Planning Commission coming up here soon? It's a project that includes 150 detached single-family homes. They're going to be site condominiums. So there's lots of different ways you can arrange a condominium development. In this case, what they're proposing are dwelling units with shared common area. Sometimes you own the structure only and maybe a minimal amount of land around the building. Sometimes you would own just the inside of the wall. So everything's a little bit different. but that's what they're proposing in this case. The building setbacks for each lot are shown on the site plan. There's some setbacks you can see. We call them building envelopes. Basically, all development has to occur inside the building envelope in a PUD. There's 5 phases to this project. You can see in the site plan, that's all spelled out, how many lots are in each phase. As I mentioned, approximately 20 acres, the most northern part is going to be donated to the township. It'll remain as open space, and that donated land will be part of the PUD. So that counts towards 50% open space requirement. I realize that you're not going to be able to see this, but for those of you, you look at the township website. I think Frank sent a link around. You can find the application materials on the website. What you're seeing here is the layout of the development. It does not translate well to a PowerPoint and looking at a screen, but please go find it yourselves. Take a look at the layout. We can answer any questions you might have. There's a lot of information to be found, but you'll see the development is limited to that southern portion of the property. And hopefully you can see a little bit that there's open space. It's the shaded portions of the property. So PUD, what is it? It's planned unit development. What it really means is the yard setbacks, yards, the size of the lots, the type of dwelling units, and frontage requirements are generally waived for a PUD. So it's not like a typical platted neighborhood. What this does, it allows for clustering of lots. It allows the lots to be smaller and closer together. So that means more open space, less developed land. The PUD ordinance requires 50% open space. That's excluding land in the wetland that's inundated with wetlands or located in a floodplain. So you take that out, you take what's left, divide it in half, and that's what the property owner can build on. This is the yield plan. So the following slides are going to go into more detail. One of the requirements of a PUD, in order to establish density and the number of units that a developer can build, they've got to show us how can you lay this out as a platted subdivision. So, and that's called a yield plan. Why I wanted to show this here was you'll see the large land area that's covered with lots. And to me, it's a pretty stark contrast compared to the PUD site plan we saw a minute ago. What I highlighted in red are the 2 road connections. If this was developed as a plat, which is not proposed, you'd see these required road connections to Creekstone Trail and to Sophia Parkway. You're also seeing some development on that northern 20 acres that could happen in a platted subdivision. So I want to really touch on kind of what is the difference between a platted subdivision and a PUD. So if this land was developed, they really had 2 options. It was develop it as a plat or a PUD. Per the rezoning conditions, the applicant's obligated to use the PUD ordinance. So what that means is larger lots, larger, wider roads, less green space, more trees cut down, no required open space, required road connections, no land donation, and minimal setbacks from Champion Woods. The only setbacks you'd see are really whatever the rear yard setback is, which is 30 or 40 feet. So let's talk about density. This is kind of complicated. I'm going to go fast, but if you have any questions, you can ask at the end. So like I mentioned, developer has to submit a yield plan that shows how the land is developed as a plat. What that does is it provides the total number of lots that could be permitted in the PUD, and it's really a starting point, which you'll learn about in a second. So the yield plan, you can find it on the township website, shows 122 lots. The way density is calculated, it's a little bit different. So what you do is you take that number the yield plan establishes for properties with wetland and floodplain, which this property is one of, it does have both. There's a calculation we use. You see this N equals D times C. So what that is, it's the maximum number of units permitted is reached by multiplying the allowable density from the yield plan, so that's 122 units, by the percentage of the site that's in floodplain and wetland expressed as a decimal plus 1. So there's 26.7 acres of floodplain and wetlands out of the total 93.90 total acres. So what you do, I'm showing the math here, you just divide that out. So you get 0.2852, add 1. So I've got 122 lots times that 1.2852 equals 156 lots. I call this the wetland factor. That's not what our ordinance calls it, but I think it's an easy way to remember it. Is there is a slight bonus for properties with wetlands. And I think the thinking at the time when the ordinance was adopted, is this was a good way to get people to use the PUD ordinance on properties that had wetland floodplain. So we take that 156 lots. Now, the PUD ordinance also offers a density bonus. So that allows them, when the PUD is designed with unique and extraordinary amenities, such as preservation of woodlots, provisions of lakes, recreational facilities, affordable housing, etc., you can add 25% units to it. So we have 156 lots, 25 times 25%, so there'd be 39 additional lots on top of that. So with the wetland factor plus the density bonus, the potential for this property using the PUD is 195 lots. So the conditions of the rezoning and the work that our township manager and township board had with the applicant, the rezoning was limited to density of no more than 150 lots. So you see the comparison between what could be built, potentially 195, and what the rezoning limited project to at 150. So really quickly, the review process for a PUD, the public hearing has already been scheduled. Some of you received letters from me if you were within the notification area. The public hearing is on Zoom. So I think we're all pretty familiar with Zoom. Contact me if you have issues with accessing Zoom. The public hearing will be held on Monday, August 10 at 7 p.m. Overall process is public hearing at the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is advisory on PUD requests, so they make a recommendation. Then the board holds a separate public hearing, and that is preceded by a second set of notices. So anyone gets a notice the first time around, will get another one, another letter from me. The board will discuss the project, probably at 2 meetings, discussion at 1 meeting, the public hearing at 1 meeting, and potentially decision at the following meeting. If the PUD is approved, that would be followed by site plan review. That's a staff level review. We do hold a public hearing. Notification area is smaller. It's only adjacent properties, but it is open to the public. We don't hold a public hearing at the Planning Commission or the board level. Typically we do it in a weekday afternoon, but it is definitely open to the public and it will likely be held on Zoom. But part of that process, really what we're doing is confirming agency approval. So road department, Ingham County Drain Office. That's part of my job as staff, is making sure that these agencies have reviewed the project and are granting their approvals. And we do not, I can't emphasize this enough, we do not issue any permits until everything has been addressed. So we see those sign-offs from the relevant agencies. And there's a big focus during site plan review on utilities. So our engineering department is a big part of that process. That's all I've got. I really want to just hit the high points, not take too long. I'm available to answer questions after this. So back to Frank.
Thank you, Peter. Does Mayberry Homes, Dave or Bob, do you have anything that you want to offer that Peter did not cover? You have to unmute, Bob.
Okay. We've been working on the design for some time in different iterations. And when we got the conditions, when we agreed to the conditions, we modified designs that we've worked on and came up with this, trying to check off that we've met every condition on top of doing the product types that we want to do. We're doing 80, 70, and I think we may have some 60-foot lots. So we have 3 products we wanted to represent, and we wanted to do 150 units and utilize the site as best we could and the open space as best we could. So that's pretty much the design. David, do you have anything else?
No, I think Peter is very, very eloquent and very comprehensive in his presentation this evening. I just want to thank everybody for all the effort they put into this back in 2019 and led to the ultimate approval of the rezoning in early 2020. We're just excited to move this forward. As Bob mentioned, we believe we've met the conditions, and we're excited to finally be in a place where we can get this PUD in front of Planning Commission and start the process.
Thank you very much. And just for the residents know, we have Supervisor Ron Stika on, Trustee Pat Jackson, Treasurer Phil DeShane, our County Drain Commissioner Patrick Lindeman. We have our fire leadership team, our police leadership team here. And let me see who else. Oh, and our brand new intern who's trying to follow a local government. He thinks it'll be a great career, Ben Peacock. He had his first day today with us. So welcome, Ben. And Ken Lane is here from our Economic Development Office. So we have a number of people on here to answer questions you might have. I appreciate, Peter, your presentation, and thank you to Mayberry. At this time, we'd be happy to take any questions that you have regarding the proposal that's going to the Planning Commission on August 10th. So any questions that you might have? Hopefully you can see that the development plan before you matches exactly what we negotiated several months ago, or maybe a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago now. Yeah.
This is Chuck.
Chuck, go ahead.
I know one of the things that we discussed, gosh, several months ago was, and I see Patrick is on, but had to do with the drain issues and the water. And what happened when Champion Woods was built and to the homes behind Heron Creek. So what is the plan to address that here? I mean, is there a plan? As long as there's a plan, I don't need the details.
Pat?
You okay? Could you hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. Well, our office hasn't got any copies yet that I've seen anyway of the final plans. So we're waiting for the preliminary review. And the preliminary review is just preliminary. It doesn't have any, we okayed the project or anything like that. This project, like all PUDs and all subdivisions or platted developments or malls or whatever you want to do, any land use changes at all, need to meet our standard guidelines. They are going to be required to hold back the first 1 inch for pre-cleaning in accordance with the Federal Clean Water Act Phase 2. So they're going to have to deal with the first 1 inch of any storm water that might fall and have it cleaned and polished before it leaves the site. Probably about 80% of all the pollution that might exist in terms of runoff that comes off of a site like this would be caught up in its first 1 inch of water, and that has to be dealt with. So their plan has to accommodate that. There are other elements in terms of sizing of the pipes, the discharge points of the pipes, how it gets to the main drain. All of those will be addressed when I see their submittal for the final plan that they're asking to be approved. We will not approve anything until it meets our standards. Any development of land, regardless of what type of development it might be, cannot do any harm to its neighbors in terms of water movement, water volume, or pollution loading. So we plan on addressing all of those issues. I don't have any specifics yet because I haven't really taken a good look, a hard look at the plans yet. But my staff is ready to review them, and our staff engineer is ready to go through them.
Okay.
As soon as she has them in her hand.
All right, that's good to hear. Now I'm thinking that the developers followed the process for the sanctuary and for Champion Woods. Both of those developments caused problems for the residents that lived in that area. Both of them did, and I've got firsthand views of both situations, and I own a parcel on Hewlett Road that's backs up to the sanctuary park and the natural area and stuff, and there's flooding that's back there that never used to be. So what's going to be different about this one than what was followed the process for the sanctuary and for Champion Woods?
Okay, one, we revised our standards. They're a little stricter today than they were when those were approved.
Okay.
Having said that, doesn't really make any excuse for any flooding problems that might exist in those two developments. One of those developments, I believe, needed a DEQ permit, and the person from DEQ, which is now called Eagle, was a guy by the name of John Scabina. He ordered the end of the pipe up to be put higher than what we recommended. Therein lies part of the problem. We could not override his order to do that. Eventually, we're going to have to rip that pipe out and replace it and put a lower elevation in the invert of that pipe. It's creating some minor flooding problems with that.
Right.
The other issue is that all the soils in that area, as you well know if you're familiar with the area, there's a lot of scattered wetlands throughout the whole Heron Creek drainage system. There's also some high grounds, but there's a high water table in there which fluctuates at least 2 feet a year. It'll go up sometimes and it'll come down sometimes. It just depends on whether we have a wet year. So some of the flooding was caused by a high elevation to the water table. These are not ideal locations for building subdivisions or malls or whatever. The Okemos School, which is down the road from this, for example, was built on really poorly drained soils. And it is right next to some Houghton muck is the name of the type of soil that it's right next to. And you can almost never drain that. It just is impossible to drain. But then in saying that, I'm just trying to make a point that within the Heron Creek watershed, there are pockets of Houghton muck all over the place. And once it soaks up water, it really doesn't drain very well at all. So the high ground that is in there is where they're planning to put the housing and the development, and we'll make sure that all of a positive public outlet so that they can drain properly without causing any damage. And I don't want to say much damage, I want to say any drainage problems.
Yeah, good.
Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but we try very hard to make sure that the developers work with us to mitigate any negative impact from their development on their neighbors or any of the other utilities that might be in the area. So our office is dedicated to doing that. Our job is to protect the public's best interest. And that means that we have to oversee stormwater movement and coordination with other utilities, sanitaries, gas lines, and all the other kinds of cables that might be buried in the ground and so on. So we're looking forward to meeting with the developer, and I've worked with Bob before, and he's done some good projects, and he doesn't have a problem meeting all of our restrictions. At least he hasn't so far on any of his projects.
Okay.
And if we can keep Eagle out of there and keep them from messing around with our design, we're going to do okay.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, Commissioner Lindeman. And I will attest to his work. If you know where we're putting up our marketplace on the green on Central Park Drive right now, we ran into some obstacles there with drainage and some issues, and it required us to spend, I won't say a lot more money than we had planned, and a couple of visits down to the drain office to work these issues out. And he held the township very accountable on that project, he and his staff, and but was very cooperative as well, and just held us to some high standards. So and that was just several months ago. So I can attest to his work and his diligence. So thank you for that answer. Next question.
I guess I have a follow-up to Pat related to the drainage. So my name is Dan McColl. I'm a neighbor in the Champion Woods, and I'm also here representing the association board. So I might have a disproportionate number of questions because of that. But one question related to draining is, you know, I know that one of the conditions that was part of the rezoning had to do with this issue of draining, and that, you know, the developer would give any kind of assistance to not only any new drainage issues, but old ones. How will what is the process for evaluating the current drainage issues and and well, at least Champion Woods and maybe in Heron Creek too, and what the solutions are to those.
A couple different things, if I can speak to a couple different aspects of that. First of all, Heron Creek itself. Heron Creek itself has always been plagued with a outlet problem, which is north of Mount Hope. And it was a sanitary sewer line that was laid down by the township some many years ago. And the elevation of that pipe was high. It artificially backed up water for miles in the Heron Creek. That problem's been solved. We rebuilt the outlet just south of Mount Hope where Heron Creek dumps into. There's a marshy area there north of the railroad tracks and south of Mount Hope. I'm sure that you guys are probably familiar with that. Well, we rebuilt all of that. So from the railroad tracks to the north, we think the flow patterns are really well. They're well maintained. They have very little flooding problems, except when the river comes up in height and it backs up all the way to Mount Hope through that drain system. Therein lies one of the problems that's really hard for us to get a handle on. I can't back the river up or make the river move any faster at this point. Now, we've been taking log jams out of the river. A lot of them, actually, over 100 of them are going out. That's dropped one log jam alone, just north of there in the river, dropped the elevation of the river by 2 foot. It's regular elevation went down 2 feet, and that's how much water was backing up in the Heron Creek. So that's been taken care of. So adding all of that stuff together, we have a cleaner, a more efficient outlet north of the railroad tracks. It's south of the railroad tracks that there's a hodgepodge of wetland systems in there that need to be preserved. And they over time change. So I can't give that there won't be some flooding because of some of those wetlands in how they change over time. They fill up with sediment, they back water up, and the main channel of the drain needs to be cleared out from time to time. We did a major clearing out of that drain about 10 years ago, and 10 or 15 years ago. And it's up for more heavy maintenance pretty soon within the next 2 or 3 years. If we can keep the outlet, the Heron Creek, clean and running properly, then it should alleviate any backups from the main drain, okay? Except for when the river gets too high. All right, now the river does back up into those floodplain areas some. And then you add the water that's coming off of the properties that go into the drain and mix with the floodplain areas that are there. It could, from time to time, cause a problem, okay? That is virtually uncurable. I mean, it's due to heavy rains, it's due to the river backing up, which we can't solve that problem right away. That's going to be a long-term 20, 30 years to fix that problem. And I don't want to talk about it now, but we're working toward trying to solve the instability of the Red Cedar River. The property itself, as it develops, will have an impact. The rain that falls on it is going to run off in greater volumes than it did before. In other words, if you had a hardwood forest and it rained 2 inches of water, probably a ½ an inch would wind up running off of that hardwood forest. Now, if you put roads, sidewalks, roofs, and that kind of thing on the same land, it's going to run off probably 60 to 70% more volume of water than would have run off to the drain before. The developer is required to hold back that extra volume of water and is not allowed to discharge it at a greater volume or rate of volume than is what was there before. So we can assume that their water retention values that they're going to have to hit are quite steep. All right. Now, as the wetlands and the ponding areas and so on change over time, they fill up with debris, leaf litter, all kinds of different things, fill them up, and they take up the volume of water storage. So we're going to try to mitigate that when we talk to the developer and see what we can do on his property to get the rates of runoff at an acceptable rate of flow, and then deal with the volumes that he has, that he's going to create, the extra volume of water. The Mud Creek drain was designed to handle the runoff rates that are all pre-developed rates of flow. So when they built the Heron Creek 100+ years ago, that was all farm field. And the Heron Creek was built and designed to handle farm field runoff, plus the wooded areas and the other kind of areas that might have existed back then were all taken into consideration when they built that drain. Now, we can't improve the size of the drain. It's pretty much what it's going to be. So we can only protect it by reducing or controlling the internal flow within development. So, and the developer is going to have to meet those criteria, or they'll be doing damage to people downstream and they'll be doing damage to their neighbors. So our office is going to carefully look at that and make sure that we can do everything within our power and within the law that the law offers us to make sure that they do it right. And I've worked with Bob before too, and his developments, he usually meets or surpasses our standard of discharge, both in pollution loading and in volume loading. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and thanks for making it, saying it in a way that makes sense. But it doesn't. It addresses the new development, not the problems from the existing developments, which during the rezoning discussions we were told would be addressed in this process.
Okay, in the process of looking at older problems, each piece of land that's developed has to take into consideration anything from upstream that passes through that property. So let's just say that he's on the lower part of the hill and he's going to develop part of the hill, there's a water problem. He cannot impede or add to any damage to that property on the top of the hill. We'll make sure that he does not do that. If there are problems already in existence with the top of the hill water, which would be the surrounding neighborhoods and subdivisions, we can work with the developer to see how much of that we can solve with the developer's help. Okay, we do that with every development. We talk about the area within the watershed that is affected by that development, and that development sits between other developments and the Heron Creek. So we'll look at all those outlets and all those connections, and if the outlets have to be cleaned, we'll make sure they're cleaned before that he develops. It'll all be part of his work. His obligation is to do no harm to anybody upstream from him. So he can't back water up. He cannot legally, he cannot close off the outlets. He has to accommodate all of that water plus the water that he's going to generate because of his development. And we got some pretty smart people and some pretty good engineers that can figure out some of those logistical things. I'm more of a fluvial physicist. That's what my PhD was in. I'm not a civil engineer, but we're going to need to work with some civil engineers and figure out how to address those problems. And then we have to know what the problems are. So it would be Angie Cosman is our staff engineer, and she needs to hear from anybody in those subdivisions that has a problem so we can list them and try to address them as we go through in this development. Okay, and we're not going to let them off the hook. I mean, we're pretty stringent on trying to meet our standards. So
no, I see that that's happening. I guess my concern is that if the water, I mean, we feel like we have a current problem, and if that problem is not solved, then the problem is not going to be passed on to the new development, the downhill property, I guess. So it seems we just want to make sure that the existing drainage problems that we have are going to be resolved throughout the development of this neighborhood.
Well, we will do everything we can to mitigate any existing problems. If we find some mitigating problems that through the development we can solve or help solve, then we will certainly negotiate with the developer to do that. If the problems are no cause of the developer or the development, and they are still problems, we can work with the neighborhood association and the residents to go in and try and fix those problems. I can tell you right now that there is a drain in one of those neighborhoods. I can almost see it in my head, but I can't picture the name of the road it's on. That the DEQ ordered it to be elevated higher than what we recommended it be, and I couldn't override his order. So it really, excuse my language, but I'll just say that it upset me quite a bit. And I had conversations with the governor about it, and with the head of the DEQ back then, and so on, and they stuck to their guns for whatever reasons, but it created a problem. So we will do everything we can to make sure that we can address all of those problems. Some of them we probably can solve, and some of them we can't, but it'd be a good thing, a starting point, to know what the problems are so that we can compare them to what the developer is doing and try to solve them along with the developer and with the township. Does that help?
Yes, so it would be helpful to us to put out the word to our residents to communicate with your office as to what
any backyard puddles, anything. It doesn't matter what it is, but I want to look at them, and if we can solve them, we'll do our best to solve them. Okay.
Yes.
Dan, do you have
Just one more comment. You can declare war on water, but you're never going to win. So water has its own way of doing things, and we just have to work with it and work around it. Okay.
Thank you,
Mr.
Commissioner.
Lindman, the drain that leads from Champion Woods goes underneath the service road over into the Silverleaf development. That appears to us to be too high. That could not be the drain you're talking about, is it?
No, that's not the one. But if that's too high, we can talk lowering it. I believe that that's a private culvert. I'm pretty sure it is. And we can take a look at that and replace it, lower it. Replacing one culvert is not that big of a price tag. And but once the development is built, you have paved roads and you have other utilities in there, it becomes a mess. So we want to plan all these solutions, whatever they may be. Would like to plan them prior to approval of this project.
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Dan McCall, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, but I mean, that one came up for the drain. I mean, yeah, let me go back to my notes, but if somebody else has a question ready.
Hi, it's Lynne Page. I have a question about the site plan. If I'm not sure from looking at it, for instance, the lots that are numbered 94 and 96, is the frontage on those 34 feet and 26 feet, or is that number not indicate the size of the lot? Well, maybe it's the rear of it.
Dave?
I think those dimensions you're looking at are the rear of the lots. They're kind of pie-shaped lots.
Yes.
With the wider dimension is on the street frontage.
Okay, that seems very, very narrow to the rear. I'm just wondering, I can't tell from here, what are the setbacks going to be? Are they going to be uniform for each of the lots, or does it vary from lot to lot? I'm not certain how you apply that. What's the setbacks on the side and the front and the rear once you put a home on there?
Sure. Well, we'll have minimum setbacks that will be approved through this process, and so that would be the minimum setback from the home to the property line, from the home to the street. So that then establishes the building envelope in which the home can sit. So that the setbacks between homes can vary depending on which homes are placed on the lots. So we're sensitive to I guess what you may be looking at as odd shaped lots to make sure that they would accommodate at least a plan that we build. But we think that we've designed these lots, or we will ultimately design these lots to fit most of our plans.
So that when the site plan with the building that will be constructed on them, that'll be discussed directly with community planning and development, and they will approve it then, because those, lot lines, how tiny they are, don't really seem consistent with most of the other developments in the area. That seems, 26 feet seems very tiny, and so does 34 feet.
If I may, this is Peter. So Lynn, I want to direct you to a couple different things. One, on the site plan that you're looking at that's on the website, right under the title at the very top of the plan, and I understand you're probably looking at it on a computer, but you'll see two typical lot layouts. So that shows the proposed setbacks on the lots, and those would be uniform throughout the development, with the exception of that cul-de-sac up along Bennett Road. And two, the PUD does allow for it, and frankly encourages smaller lots and clustered development. So the idea here is the smaller the lot, the more open space that can be set aside for forever, really, in perpetuity. So, I mean, that's really in keeping with the intent of this project. I understand, I mean, and really what it boils down to is what is, the person that buys the lot and their comfort level with the size of the lot and where the house is placed on it. We will not see, so with the exception of those typical layouts, like I said, which will impact the entire project, on a case-by-case basis. So when building permits come in, that's when we'll see the house is laid out. But as long as you take a look at that typical setbacks, then you're going to see about how they're going to look in the future.
I just, have a concern that if the lots are too narrow at one end or the other, that it could devalue the home or the neighboring properties if it's, not of a sufficient size. And once you approve the site plan, this is really the appropriate time to consider that, in my understanding.
Anything else, Lynn?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to Dan. You had some other questions, I believe, Dan.
Well, yeah, actually, I had one related to the setbacks. I just tried to pull up the site plan. I don't know if there's a problem with the website or my computer, but I couldn't access it. But I looked at it earlier, and it looked like the properties were pretty close to the property line. And I'm wondering, just ensuring that they do meet the setback requirement. That was one of the conditions that Peter said the developer gave, and if you could talk about how they did that, how they met those requirements.
Yeah, this is Peter again. So if you're looking at the site plan, I just pulled it up on the website. It seems to be working for me. It may load a little slow on some of your computers. The primary setback we're concerned about was the distance between really the closest home that's in Champion Woods and the closest home in Silverleaf. So I think the biggest thing you'll want to look at is, there's two things. One, on the kind of in the middle of the plan, you see Lafayette Circle is identified, and you'll see a distance there of 155 feet and change between looks like lot 128 and lot 17 and off of Lafayette Circle there. And then also just south of Sophia Parkway, you're going to see a setback between what appears to be lot 34 off Sophia Parkway and lot 57 in Silverleaf. So those were the setbacks the developer committed to with the rezoning in terms of distance between the two developments.
So, okay, I for whatever reason, it's saying page not found. I'm sure it's on my end, so I can't see those. But so it sounds like what you're saying is the setback came on the Champion Woods side because it was there already. Is that right?
It existed already, yeah. So, and if that weren't, yes, you're right. That's where that setback came from.
So the fact that they're right up against the border didn't interfere with the setback requirement. Essentially, there was never going to be a way to build within that setback.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else, Dan?
Yeah, I guess I have a question for Peter about the yield plan, and maybe it's moot based on sort of the ultimate number that came up. But so as of now, it's rezoned, but with conditions. Was the platted number used? I believe it was 122. Was that under the old zoning or the new zoning?
That the yield plan was designed with current zoning.
With current zoning, okay. But the current zoning doesn't allow for houses in the northern parcel because of the conditions, right?
The current zone, potentially you could get lots under current zoning in that northern portion. Now, obviously there are wetland and floodplains in that area, so you might not be able to get very many because
the conditions don't allow for that though, right?
Well, the conditions, you're right. The conditions of the rezoning require that that area be donated.
So the current zoning, I guess I'm wondering why, if the current zoning is being used and the current zoning doesn't allow for houses to be built in that northern area because of the conditions of the rezoning, how can those be used in the yield plan?
Well, what the yield plan is showing is just maximum build on the entire development. So I understand your point, but the current zoning also says that there can be no road connections. So really what we're looking at is the development as a plat if it was just straight zoned RAA, no conditions.
Oh, but there are conditions to the rezoning, right?
Right, but the idea behind the PUD, if you look in our ordinance on how, like, what they use to put the yield plan together, that's what we do. You lay it out as it could be developed as a plat, and then you take that number and use it for density.
But with the current rezoning, if it was platted right now, there couldn't be houses up there because the rezoning has a requirement for that, right?
It was negotiated to make the donation to do it with the yield plan being the way if it was zoned to the RA, and then calculating the density. We wouldn't have made the donation and then asked for the rezoning of the remainder part. So all this came together, and I think that's the way they always do it. It's our property, and we do theoretically, what could the property take in laying out platted lots?
Right, but right with the current rezoning, the platted couldn't have houses up there.
Just a minute. After we did that, we said we would donate the property. So it wasn't that the property was zoned with that restriction. The restriction was placed on because of the outcome. So it wasn't zoned RA, but we donated this property. We did the calculations, we did the yield plan, and then we said, if we can do these things, the 150 houses, we will donate that northern piece and not utilize it, not build on it.
Okay, so Peter, I mean, just the, I mean, you're confident that the numbers used were the right numbers given the current conditions of the PUD, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, of the yield plan. The numbers that were used in the yield plan, you're confident that the base number was correct.
Yeah,
to use those northern ones.
Right, and I've been over the math several times, and the way that it's shown here and the factors that have been applied are correct.
Okay, so they could use houses in the north under the current zoning to determine the yield plan, even though the current zoning relies on the conditions that say houses can't be built up there.
Yes, I understand your point, but like I said, the conditions also say no connections to these two roads. So the idea behind a PUD is you show the entire property as it could be developed as a plat. And in this case, we're not applying the conditions to the plat because the conditions weren't related to development of the land as a plat. So I am comfortable with the way that it's been proposed. I think it meets our ordinance. So So that's, I mean, those are my thoughts on it.
I think on top of that, Peter or Mark, isn't there another bonus for preserving, doing a excellent job of preserving land that we didn't apply even, that goes on top of your calculation?
And that's why I suggested the question might have been moot to begin with, because, you know, it seems like your math determined that there could theoretically be 195 houses on there and it's limited to 150.
Yes, I think there could be more than that because we didn't apply a factor for preserving, exceptionally preserving natural features, which I think donating that 20 acres would count. But we didn't need that many houses. We didn't want that many houses. So that would have taken us up another 20%. I believe that's the way it works. It is moot because we got the number of lots we wanted. We weren't trying to, you know, go to the upper limits of what
The question that was given to me was, you know, just to make sure that the township, you know, did do the right math there.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes, on the site plan I'm looking at, is there still going to be access, emergency access from Sophia into Silverleaf, or is that just a dead end road back there now?
I believe there's emergency access.
Yeah.
That's has basically a gate or a stop that the fire department would break through if they
Okay.
if they coming or going either direction.
Okay, thank. It just from the plan I couldn't tell. It almost looked like there was just the road was ending there and there was no going to be any access. But that's fine, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, if I could chime in, what's going to be proposed in those areas are, so we're talking at the end of Morning Vista, the end of Sophia would be probably breakaway bollards. So they would restrict motor vehicle access, but allow pedestrians and bicycles. And in the case of an emergency, could be driven over by a fire vehicle or an ambulance.
That's great.
That's exactly what we're hoping for. Thank you.
Along Bennett Road, are there plans for sidewalks, considering there's gonna be a lot of kids going from that neighborhood likely to the elementary school?
Are you talking? This is Peter. I don't know if you can see me on the screen.
I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm just asking.
Yep, I just introduced myself because there's a lot of people on the call. So
Oh, okay.
If you're talking about in Silverleaf, yes, there will be required minimum 5-foot sidewalks and the development on both sides of the streets.
I'm talking about if you want to walk from Silverleaf to Bennett Woods Elementary, are the kids going to be out there on the shoulder on Bennett Road, or are there going to be sidewalks? We have a very wide sidewalk on Hewlett from Champion Woods down to Bennett Woods because there's gobs of kids, bicycles, scooters, you name it. It's packed twice a day. And I expect we're going to have something similar or even more from Silverleaf. Is there going to be a safe place for those kids to get to and from the school?
I would have to take a look at the pedestrian bicycle master plan. Derek, do you remember what's in that area? I just don't remember right now.
Yeah, I can weigh in. I actually just grabbed it here real quick. Along Bennett Road on the north side where the development occurs, there is pathway planned in that area. So as Bob's very aware, wherever we have it on the master plan, once a property is developed, they have to provide that pathway connection. So,
What are the widths of those sidewalks though?
at a minimum, pathway is 7 feet. However, some of the newer ones we're moving towards the 10 feet, but 7 feet as a minimum.
What are you gonna insist on in this case?
Typically, if there's federal funds involved, we've been going to 10 feet, but we'll probably do a 7-foot through here, which is our standard throughout the township.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Jan. Anyone else?
This is Jim Galligan. I apologize if you've already addressed this. I joined the meeting a little bit late. I live in the woods at Heron Creek. Assuming everything goes according to plan, when would excavation start?
If everything goes according to plan, we'd hope to start next spring, summer.
Anyone else?
Can I go back to the emergency road conversation just for a moment? And I apologize if I've missed something. It's been a hectic year, as you all know. But I remember we had originally talked about that emergency road being possibly taken over and maintained by Meridian Township. And I appreciate the conversation of the breakdown barriers. That's not what you guys called them, but whatever, the things that can be driven over in an emergency. But could you tell me where do we stand with who would be responsible for the maintenance of the road?
Well, as good question, and they're called bollards, I believe. So
Thank you.
yeah, sure. So right now, as in the last several years, maybe 6, 7, 8 years, the responsibility has been to Champion Woods to maintain and have the path in a workable order going over to, I think it's, the woods of Heron Creek. The plan is, what we've said all along since this has been approved is that the township's going to take that over and connect it to our land reserve actually as well. We plan to do that, but we don't plan to take it over and sign off any documents until the project breaks ground. So we will not allow the project to break ground until we acquire the 20-acre donation, which has been promised. And then once the project breaks ground, we would keep our commitment in taking over the path. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
I guess I have just one more that's occurring to me right now. I mean, just it's hard for me because I don't look at a lot of plans to get a sense as to what the houses would look like, and especially that close together. And maybe you have pictures that you can that are on your website or something like that as one possibility to give us a better idea. Just this is really just curiosity of what the houses in that neighborhood next to ours will look like. But maybe do you have a sense as to what the price range is of the homes that will be built there? It seems like there are a lot of them more close together, so I assume it's a little different. But I don't know. You've probably done that that projection, I would imagine.
Bob, I guess the way that question is this going to look more like, maybe to help Dan and others on this call, is it going to look more like the Okemos Preserve, or is it going to look more like Champion Woods? Because there's a difference between those two developments.
Or something else. Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you, Frank.
You need to unmute, Bob.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We're going through a refresh of design. And so we're just getting that done right now. In fact, we have sort of the prototype designs. I wouldn't say that it looks like Champion Woods or it looks like Okemos Preserve exactly. It's a cleaner look, and we will have that on our website shortly because we're going to be launching those designs in all communities. We're working with an architect in California that I really like, and we're excited about it. We think it's a really cool, fresh look.
Do you know right now, I guess more to drill down into Dan's question, are we more 3 to 350 or 450 to 5?
We're going to have a couple different price ranges. That's why we have different lot sizes. So we will have some that, and David, I think you're probably a little more up to speed on it. I think we'd be starting at 350, and I think we'd be going into the 5s.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, here we are.
Sorry, I got one more question about the sidewalks. Are they going to be right? I'm very concerned about this. I walk on Hewlett Road a lot, and a lot of the sidewalks are below the level of the road. There's kind of like a little grassy area between there. Is there a standard for the sidewalk and how it's positioned relative to the road and how far off it has to be for the safe? We're talking about we're going to have like 5-year-olds walking on this road. Are they going to be right against the road? Is there like a prescribed space between the roadway and the sidewalk? And I don't even know the terms. That's my question.
This is Derek with Public Works and Engineering. For the most part, it really is kind of dictated by the width of the right-of-way. Ideally, we try to position the pathway as far away from the road as possible. In some areas, it's not possible because of the right-of-way width. So in those cases, a lot of times what we'll do is if we have to place the pathway next to the road, we do require it to be wider in those locations just to kind of create that buffer from the road. But it's really a case-by-case basis. There's no fixed, it has to be 4 foot away from the road edge or anything like that. It's really a case-by-case basis depending on the width of the road right away. And in some areas, we can work with a developer to kind of get an easement on their property to maximize that distance. But essentially they are, all pathways, all sidewalks are relatively close to the road, just the way they're set up.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Any last questions?
I have one last question. I hope it's a quick one. I apologize. I saw that there's different phases written on the plan. So I'm curious, will that be like the actual, so like all of phase 1 will be built before we move into phase 2? Or will, like if I wanted to build, could I pick any lot, or am I restricted by the phases of when it's built? And I also just have to say a side note, I love the street names. Good job to whoever came up with those names.
Thank you.
So with respect to phasing, the phasing plan that we've included is how we think we'll develop it. And then as far as when when subsequent phases would be developed, ultimately would be driven by market conditions. I think right now we've got them broken down in anywhere from say 20 to 40 lot phases, with the initial phase being tied in at the primary entrance off Bennett Road.
And you can't just pick a lot 2 phases away. We release a phase at a time. Now we may have phase 2 going when phase 1 and we're still building, because we're trying to create a flow of lots. And the sequence of getting a phase done can be 6-8 months. So we're timing it so we're not running out of lots, but we'll only sell lots and release phases.
Perfect, thank you.
Is there any restrictions from house to lot line? Distance?
Pardon me?
Is there any restrictions there as to the distance from the house to the lot line?
Yes, there's setbacks on rear, side, and front.
What is it on the side?
What is it on the side?
Is it 5 foot minimum, David?
Yes, it's minimum 5 foot side yard setbacks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that kind of, unless there's any other questions, I won't ask the board members for comments because obviously in the future they're going to have to adjudicate on this project, so I won't be asking them to comment. Any other last minute questions before we close out this evening? If not, I want to thank everyone. I want to especially thank Commissioner Lindeman for your time tonight and your expertise on the drains, and Mayberry Homes for being here. All of our staff that was here tonight, our board members, we appreciate it. And if anything else comes up, we don't end the discussion here. The Planning Commission is 7 o'clock on August 10th, Peter. So that's when the Planning Commission will begin their review. And let us know if you have any other questions. And again, you can email and contact us at any time. So thank you for your time this evening, and I hope you have a great evening. And Jan, I hope to see you out there on Hewlett Road.
Wave to me.
I will. All right. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.